and just don't quit. There's a point where you have to understand, like, okay, this industry might not be for me. Like, if it's one thing that you don't really understand, like what's going on in the market, you don't really find a passion for it, that's fine. Like, move on. It's not for you. Whether it's, banking, private equity, or, working at a restaurant, right? Just making sure that you're aligning yourself in something you're passionate with, and you're building the skill sets on a day-to-day basis to really achieve that goal.
All right, thanks for joining the Nagomi podcast today. I'm your host, Sean Obana. And before we get into Joseph Huang, our special guest for today, his experiences, I'm going to start you guys off with a couple of quotes. It's not even debatable. I'm getting so rich, my music's not even relatable. That's Churchill Downs by Drake. That's the lyric from Drake. And making good money comes with a cost, and sometimes it ain't worth the loss. Traveling Kid by Wyatt Flores. So I think it's cool that seeing across two different genres of music, right? Drake is more hip hop and Wyatt Flores is more country, that there's this same notion of money, and everybody's worried about money and the problems that are associated with people that have more money, like Drake. They have different problems. They have a totally different life, and it's hard for him to relate to the people to listen to his music. And so I like to keep that in mind throughout this podcast. And as we talked about in the podcast about capitalism and how the different classes are experiencing different problems and how this is a big issue, I think that relates to today and the topic that we're talking about today, and the power of will. The power of will to get you to where you want to be. What is success really, right? And we talk about how are we defining our own success. And how are we getting to where we want to be? So with that, Joseph, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm hot. I'm a little bit sick, unfortunately. So if I sound a little weird, or if I'm doing a little weird things, well, that's probably why. But getting into a little bit about your experiences, like where are you from? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Joseph Huang. I grew up in a small town in Washington State called Vancouver, Washington. It's probably like maybe 20, 25 minutes outside of Portland, Oregon. So, had somewhat of a city experience, but also lived in the suburbs and had a large variety of experiences from, business, outdoor activities, and just pursuing life, I guess.
And so to me, meeting you this year, right, I transferred to BC, and so did he. So I'm curious, coming from a place that's pretty remote, I'd say. It's very, there's a lot of nature in Oregon. How did you land on your investment banking? You're interested in having a corporate job. How did you find such a career path?
Yeah, well, I'll give the long story of, how I kind of fell into the world of finance and what really got me interested. I feel like every other kid out there, I wanted to try something on my own and did the classic, lemonade stand in 5th grade or middle school or whatever that may be. Quickly became interested with the idea of, starting a business, earning money, accumulating capital essentially. And so I quickly realized that, you have to be 16 to work legally. And so I was trying to figure out like opportunities where I could really, gain more capital passively. At the time, I was really into, building computers. I was huge into gaming, and I realized that I could actually use my computer to actually mine cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum at the time. And so I actually started mining my own Ethereum and Bitcoin probably in around 6th or 7th grade. Did a class presentation about how, Bitcoin is going to change the world in 7th grade. My English teacher,
wow, that was early.
It was very early, yeah, very early adopter. Ethereum at the time was $400 for context. I think Bitcoin was around like 6,000 to 7,000, and now it's at like 70 to 80K, and it broke north of 100K a couple months ago. So very early into the crypto space, very early on into like the whole like tokenization world thing. But after a while, I started to get kind of pushed out by my computing power. More powerful chips were available. The retail investors and retail miners essentially weren't really able to see the same profit in return. So I got more into, trading, cryptocurrency itself, and then really became more interested in going back to the business, thinking about that lemonade stand of how could I start a business or, potentially buy a business that would accumulate and let me get that passive income. So that's kind of how I discovered private equity after watching, a YouTube video in middle school, early high school. Got really interested in the space. Actually had my very first networking call my sophomore year of high school. I was looking for people in the private equity world where I could really, reach out and learn a little bit more about how they broke into it. I reached out to an individual at CVC down in San Francisco, and he took my call and he was really surprised that I was, like a 15-year-old kid really interested in what he was doing. And from that, after speaking with this individual, his name's Ben, I got really interested in the space, and he told me, you kind of have to do investment banking before you do, private equity or other opportunities in the world of finance. And he said, don't worry about it until your junior year of college.
Wow, so you knew from a very young age what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I wasn't 100% set on the world of PE, early high school yet, or like in my high school years. I was also considering, being like a bark pilot, which is you captain cargo ships across the ocean to the river, and that crossing can get really treacherous. I grew up sailing on the water, so I was really interested in pursuing a potential career as a bar captain. And then also dermatology seemed really interesting to me as well. For a long period of time, it was my dream to go to Johns Hopkins and do med school, but quickly realized that med school is a lot of money, and it's an additional 5, 8, 12 years on your time, and I didn't really see that investment opportunity.
Yeah, no, totally. That's so interesting that you're interested in all of these things. I mean, dermatology, right? Doing that like physical labor on the ship, and then investment banking, like that's news to me. That's really cool. And so I guess growing up, you kind of knew what you wanted to be. So that helped you refine, like, okay, well, this is where I need to go to be in that place. So throughout high school, throughout going to college, right? So where did you start off going to college? Did you know what college you wanted to go to in high school? And how did you know that was the college? And I guess you ended up transferring. So what was your process throughout?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of reflecting back on that first networking call I had, he said, don't worry about it till like spring or fall of your junior year. So I knew that I would have the opportunity to attend a top 10 school with a top 10 finance program like BC sometime in the future. So I really focused on my dream at that time of, playing sports in college, try to do the whole recruiting process with lacrosse. Didn't really work out because that was, COVID years. A lot of people had NCAA double eligibility of, the 2 years because of red shirts and whatnot. So that kind of, pushed that dream down the corner, but I did have the opportunity to play at Arizona State my freshman year. Really resonated with the coaching staff there. I learned a lot about myself and also about, how to be a good athlete, how to be disciplined, really refine my, grit and hard work and power of will, essentially.
Awesome. And what was it that pushed you to say, like, I'm going to transfer to BC from ASU? Because for me, I wasn't even thinking about transferring. Was it always in the back of your head? Because, so you're a junior now, right? So that means you applied when you were a sophomore.
Yeah.
So you're going to be like, I guess, 2 years ASU, 2 years at BC.
Yeah.
So I guess it's not late. I wouldn't say it's late, but typically people would say it's kind of
late.
It's later.
It's pretty late, yeah.
And so what was the thing that was like? Did you end up applying your freshman year, or I don't know?
Yeah. I knew I wanted to spend somewhere kind of warm in like a larger business school, so I could really explore a lot of different opportunities. My freshman year really focused on lacrosse, and then that following summer had the opportunity to start my own pressure washing business. So that was a really cool experience. And then, stepping back to ASU, I started thinking about transferring. I knew that I wanted to spend 2 years at, a larger business school to really explore the different nuances and make sure that, this world of, IB, PE, whatever it may be in upper finance was something I really wanted to pursue compared to, alternative careers in the finance world. And so I had the opportunity to join, different clubs, talk to different people on campus. The huge benefit of going to public school with 70,000 people is it's very diverse.
You meet a lot of people.
In
a short amount of time.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of different professors, met a lot of very interesting people. And then, after going through that process, my sophomore summer, I started working in a corporate finance role for a large public company, traded on the NASDAQ.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it was really cool. They were doing a lot of manufacturing of lasers for the defense industry. At that time, Israel was under siege. Our CEO was going over there every probably month or two to try out products. I got really interested in the world of acquisitions through that role. I had the opportunity to look at a couple different pitch books and make suggestions of, potential acquisition targets, and that kind of flipped a switch for me. Really turned on the spark, and that was the moment I knew I wanted to pursue a career, in banking or PE.
And what were some of those, I guess, fundamental maybe clubs or courses that were really like, oh wow, after taking this class, after being in this club, that opened the doors for me, really? Yeah,
absolutely. My first kind of interest in the world of banking, PE, whatever it may be in the upper finance was the investment banking and finance club at Arizona State. there's a lot of hardworking kids there that just don't have the same opportunities as kids at BC, just because, brand name and like reputation of ASU, whatever it may be. But, there's still, 70,000 people. There's still going to be at least, 50, 60, 100 kids still really working for those top tier jobs. And, over the past few years, we've seen kids from ASU go to Goldman Sachs, UBS, Moelis, Vista Equity Partners, top tier placements.
And so what do you do in that club? Like, do they kind of just, I don't know, is it a big club? Is there a hierarchy to it? Do they do presentations or do you do presentations, or how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's like once or twice a week we would show up to like club meetings, and they would teach us about, technical evaluations, analysis, walk through mock interviews, behavioral prep, everything that you would do here in, say like IBA or maybe another, finance related club. And then from that, you actually have to interview to get into like the investment banking class.
Oh, wow. So like you can't just join the club just because you want to be in it. So oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that weeds out a lot of people.
Weeds out a lot of people. Like kids here can register for the investment banking, elective as their finance elective. You can't do that at a school like ASU. You have to interview, go through 2 rounds of interviews just to take the class. And they're really fun.
Wait, so you can't take a class without interviewing for a class?
You have to interview for the class and go through like 2 rounds.
Who interviews you?
The people currently in the class.
No way.
Yeah.
Like for the class, not the club.
The class. Yeah, the actual class.
And the club, though?
No, the
club, okay.
Yeah, there's like a general membership program, which is the one that I was in, and then there's like the class that you take.
And to be clear, you were in the business school already?
I was in the business school already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So you made it into the business school, and then you have to interview for the class that you went to. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So what did you see then? I'm sure you saw people who are pretty dedicated, because that takes a lot of time, right?
A lot of
dedication. So
yeah.
So how did that almost set you up and say like, okay, well this is what IB is, like this is. So how did that help you, I guess, outside of school in your future career?
Yeah, absolutely. So something also kind of unique to mention about recruiting and like interviewing for this class, they interview you at the end of your freshman year. And so during this time, I didn't really, know about, how the recruiting process worked for banking or whatever. I was focused during my freshman year of, being an athlete, performing well in the classroom and also on the field.
Yeah.
And so I started to get more focused my sophomore year after the recruiting already finished. And so a lot of kids at this time, would kind of quit, give up, be like, oh, I'm not getting in the class. Like, I'm not going to make it out of here. I'm not going to make it into like banking, whatever.
Yeah.
But, I just took it as an additional opportunity to still show up to the general membership sessions that were led by the people in the class to really learn the concepts, because I knew like, even if I didn't land in a role in banking, PE, whatever it may be, that those skills and like that knowledge is still extremely valuable in any period or any role in the world of finance. So I took it as a learning opportunity, and at the same time was applying to transfer to schools like BC and like other top 10 universities for finance, and really taking that to heart and just taking it as a learning experience really paid dividends in the future.
Awesome. So that's a lot right there. That's a lot of juggling, right?
Yeah,
we've had some student athletes on, and I mean that's a lot of juggling to do.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that, and what are you prioritizing? Because it's hard to prioritize your academics 100%. We just had JJ on, basketball player, played on like Team USA. He's a great player. And he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna do athletics 75%, and then my academics 75%." I'm like, "Dude, if 100% is your life, then that's impossible."
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about the delusion, and that delusion that you need to have in order to do great things and in order to achieve greater things. Because if you limit yourself to just 100%, well then that itself is showing that you don't have that, I don't know, self-confidence to say like I can do more things. So that was really cool to see. But if you were to just keep it in the reins of 100%, right? How do you prioritize your academics and your career, your social life? How do you balance those 3 things if you were to put those in percentages?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always have to consider like, when is this deadline? When is deliverable due? When do I need to complete this by, right? So making sure that I'm not only ranking my prioritizations off of like what's due the soonest, but also like, what's the most important, and also how big is this project, right?
Yeah.
So if I had, like a larger project, for example, I'd try to pace it out over a longer period of time versus just, cramming at the last minute. Also during this period of time, I was like coaching an 8th grade boys lacrosse team. So
oh wow.
Yeah, I was a coach. I was, I was an athlete, also doing a lot of stuff related to finance, trying to transfer. I applied to like 12 different schools. I did over 30 different essays. Like, it was a lot of work. And so making sure that I was pacing up my work over time while staying on top of my schoolwork was really keys to success. So my transfer applications didn't start November, December, like when typical kids start applying.
Yeah.
I actually started my transfer applications and like writing those essays in like August or September, just getting the day that the prompts came out.
Wow. Wait, August and September, that means like right when you got into school, you knew that you were going to transfer.
Yeah.
So during that summer, I guess your freshman summer going into sophomore year, you knew like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah. I always knew, even after I committed to Arizona State to like play lacrosse or whatever, I knew that I was going to transfer after 2 years specifically. So stepping into that sophomore year, I knew it was kind of like, go time for the career, go time to transfer out, go time to like, align my education with my long-term goals.
Wow. I think that's great. And I think it's hard for a lot of people though, because a lot of people are like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know going into college, let alone out of college. What am I going to do with my life? But you kind of have this vision, this goal. This is what I want to do. This is why I want to do it. And this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Which is really cool and amazing. But a question that I have is how do you really get through all of this juggling, right? We talked about the juggling, the different percentages, and I think like you were saying is based on the deadline. So it matters like day to day. It's not going to be the same percentages you allocate to academics. It's not going to be the same percentages you allocate to your social life or your career. Every day, it'll change day to day based on the different deadlines, the different circumstances, like you were saying, which is great. But how is it that you get through all of this juggling? Because it's a lot of juggling, and when you have a bunch of things to juggle, what is it that really gets you through? Because, I know I'm talking for a long time, but Joey's my roommate, in fact, and the first time I met him, it was like, okay, well, he has these great ambitions. He wants to do all these things. He's doing all these things. Well, I'm like, wow, that's a lot. Like, is this really realistic? But seeing him over time, over this course of the first semester and the second semester, almost a full year, it's been amazing to see the real power of will, I'll call it. Not just saying like, oh, I'm gonna do this because like I like other people are like, I'm just gonna do this and just gonna say I'm gonna do this. But it's been really exciting to see that you're putting your actions to what you're saying, I guess. I don't know if that's a good way of saying it, but it's really cool to see the power of will, that you're literally just willing yourself to do these things, and you're getting like, I don't know, a few hours of sleep a day, waking up early just to study, right? And so how do you continuously do that? How do you just keep on chugging over months and months of times? Like, do you have downtime? Like, what do you do to balance it out?
Absolutely. I mean, everything that I do, whether it's like, finance, I also run like a side business right now, which we can talk about a little bit later. I do with passion. Like, I love what I do. I love what I'm learning here. Reflecting back on what you said about balancing, right? It's really hard to juggle all those balls at once. So sometimes you might have to let something take a back burner and really prioritize not what's always, do the soonest, but also what's going to align with your long-term career goals, your personal goals, and whatnot. So like, if I'm trying to learn a new skill that's really going to help me in the future, or even going to help me, next week over something that, is not as important to me on like a day-to-day basis, or doesn't really align with my long-term career goal, I might let that take a back burner and come to it later after I've already completed the task or the priorities that really align with my deadlines and also my personal and career goals,
And so I'm curious, why is it so important that everything you do, or I feel like you're valuing your career so much? What is it that your career says about you, or why do you care so much about your career that you're going to dedicate your whole life to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think back to like when I was a kid, I had the opportunity to do, different chores, whether it was like, mowing the lawn, cleaning the bathrooms, whatever, for, some sort of allowance, might have been like 50 cents or $1 a week or whatever it was. And that really taught me the value of, hard work and grit, and seeing my parents, work their butts off and, love what they do on a day-to-day basis, but also put in the hours to really complete that, and just see the success that they've been able to have has really been motivating to me. I know there's like a typical stereotype. My grandparents immigrated from China, and so a lot of the times, like by the third or fourth generation, the descendants, the nephews, whatever, tend to get a little bit more lazy, or they'll not work as hard. So they just want a chill life. But, I view this as a great opportunity to really not only progress myself, but also my family forward. And I want to really make sure that I'm dedicating myself to my career and also my work to achieve financial independence, not only for myself, but also to give back to those who, allowed me this great opportunity.
And that's enlightening for me, because a lot of times people look at people and say, wow, like that person wants this job, wants just this career because the title, like, wow, that's a great title. That's great for you. That's the only reason I'm doing it. But there's a lot underneath the hood.
Yeah.
There's like just right there. I mean, I've been your roommate for a long time. I didn't know that your real value is in your family. The family name, like that is eye-opening. And I think a lot of times we often judge people, and we're like, wow, like this person is only doing things for the money, right? We talked a lot about what's the real value that people are, like, why are people doing it? Is it because of the money? Well, then why are people doing it? What is the money really the value here? But uncovering this, it's really your family. And so it's really advancing your family in the future. And I think that's really cool. It's really cool to see how humans really care about what's going to happen in the future. So we set everything up and we prepare and do all these things to set ourselves up for the future. And so looking so futuristically, I mean, it seems like you're an innate entrepreneur, and every time I hear you around the house, you're always thinking about these ideas and going and going and going. Sometimes, how do you pull yourself back to reality and say, like, Joey, like, I'm having all these great ideas, I want to do all these things, but how do you pull yourself back and say, dang, like, okay, I just need to focus on these things, because, I mean, I have all these great ideas, but it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think about a lot, honestly. It's really cool to see all these student entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in general really just, try to launch their business ideas, see what happens, and, learn from their failures and then reattempt it again. And I really am inspired by that process, but focusing on what's most related to me, and like keeping it focused on like a day-to-day, week-to-week, what's my goals in a year, 5 years? What are the skills I need today to really succeed in the future? And how is my future goals and, values really aligned with my longer term, 40, 50 year plan?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that, one day I want to, do my own either business or, PE firm, whatever it may be. I know that I want to work for myself and be financially independent. So what skills are most valuable today that will really help me understand business? What will really help me understand investment? And so I feel like the world of, PE banking, venture capital would really help me understand a little bit more about, startups, mature businesses, growth businesses, how those are structured, what capitalization structure really looks like for those companies, and how I can really contribute value to those companies in the future.
And I'm sure, circling back to your power washing entrepreneur venture, right? Like, I think that's super cool, but sure, people can have these ideas about this business, but it's really about how do you implement these things, and how do you turn it into reality? So how did you turn that idea into reality?
Yeah, absolutely. That freshman summer, I wanted to start my own business. I learned all these different skills in my freshman year in the classroom, and I really wanted to apply it to something of my own. And, I knew I was a freshman in college. I wanted to do something that had a low barrier of entry financially, and also something that I could, perform myself and be, an owner, operator, and really understand the business, but also perform the duty or service. And I instantly thought of, lawn mowing. Everybody does lawn mowing. It's not very high barriers to entry, and then it's not very high profit margins either. And it's cool to start your own lawn mowing business, but everyone kind of does it. It's low barrier entry. Probably go to the backyard and just practice on your lawn, whatever. I wanted something a little bit more challenging, higher profit margins, and also an opportunity for like recurring revenue. So after evaluating,
And you were what age at the time?
I was freshly 19.
Okay.
Or freshly 18, one of the two. Yeah. Freshly 19, actually. So I wanted to do something. I wanted to take this risk. After looking around, I was actually walking my dog around the neighborhood. I saw a bunch of dirty driveways. I thought, oh, you know what? Maybe pressure
And why
washing.
was it a risk?
It was a risk because, I thought of this idea. I kind of pitched it to my parents and my friends, and they were like, "What? Like, who's going to hire, a freshman in college?"
Really quick, I want to go down this rabbit hole because I like talking to my parents about, oh, I have this idea, this is great. Or talking to close friends, and they're like, oh, saying all these negative things, and this perceived doubt. I always thought, oh, my nobody believes in me, but it was actually that they cared so much that they didn't want me to fail. But at the same time, to create something great, to be successful in anything, you have to have that delusion, that extreme self-confidence in yourself to say, like, I can do this, I can see it, and this is how I'm going to do it, this is how it's going to work, this is how it's going to happen. That's how things are done. This is how inventions are created.
Absolutely.
And so an entrepreneurial venture, that's how they become successful. So I think that's really cool, and people need to start doing, like I talk about, we need to start experiencing and doing things to really learn, to really be successful and do the things that we want to do. Yeah, and so continuing on, so how did you, I mean, there was a big, like, fixed cost, right, of the actual power washer. Yeah. So how did you think about that? How was there, like, a certain price, like, or a certain amount of jobs you needed to do to earn back your money? Like, how did you think about it?
Absolutely. So I kind of want to go back to the delusion thing really quickly. I think you need to be delusion in your long-term vision and your goals of whatever you're doing, but also logical in your rationale, right? Okay. So I was, dream big pie in the sky type guy, specifically with this thing, because I just saw the opportunity, I saw the market, there's so many dirty driveways, but I wanted to make sure the numbers checked out. I wanted to be logical in my rationale. So I actually called all of my competitors in my area to understand, like, how they were charging, how they quoted jobs, and so I could really establish, like, a price range of my competitors, doing, like, essentially competitor analysis. I'd hop on the phone, be like, hey, really interested in having my driveway washed. How much would you charge me? How much do you charge per square foot? They give me a price. Did that probably 10, 20 times with different, pressure washing people on the phone. So after I established a price range, kind of mapped out my own driveway on Google Earth, you can actually get a square footage off of that, which is really cool. And then kind of determine how much would it be for upfront costs to really get into pressure washing. So after adding up the cost of, surface cleaner, which is kind of like a specialized equipment that helps you pressure wash faster, in addition to, like, the pressure washer itself, I was going to use my dad's old F-150 to just, lug around all my equipment. It put me in the hole around $1,400 or $1,500. So I knew that after mapping out my own driveway, and I was like, okay, it's probably like $400 or $500 job. Probably need 2 to 3 jobs to break even. Very confident in myself that I can get 2 to 3 jobs based off of my family.
Oh wow, 2 to 3 jobs and you break even?
Yeah, 2 to 3 jobs to be even.
So people really, really value what you're doing.
Yeah, they value it. I'd charge typically between like 25 cents to 35 cents per square foot. Average driveway is 1,000 square feet or maybe 2,000 square feet. Probably around like $250, $500 for like a driveway. And so there's a huge opportunity, huge market there. Really easy to just bang out work.
And you use their water.
You use their water, yeah. So like the only reoccurring cost you have really is like your gas essentially on a per job basis, which is like it cost me probably like $20-$25.
Wow.
And I'd make in revenue probably like $600 per job, and it'd take me probably like I'd try to make it so I would get like 100 to like 120 revenue per hour. Mm-hmm. So it would only take me like 5-6 hours.
That's really cool, and I think that today, talking to people, I guess in my community, they're like, when you come up with an idea, it's hard to say, okay, well, that's gonna work. That everybody's negative, but it's cool hearing that your market, right? Your market is your community around you.
Yeah.
So that right there shows that like your market doesn't have to be global. Like you can make a lot of money within your community. Your market doesn't have to be big, and reaching out to your community that's around you is really the best way to do it. And like he was saying, doing a comps analysis, I mean that's comps analysis of your local businesses is the best way to do it, and that's great. And we talk a lot about investing on here, and I mean when you're looking for stocks to invest in, you do a comps analysis, and it's a similar thing.
Yep.
And so you're into investing. Do you personally invest a little bit?
I do. I'm not as into it as I probably should be, but I am in the space.
But you invest though, right?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So So I don't know, as a beginner investor, right? We're both pretty young. We're both beginner investors. We're in the first quarter of our lives, I like to say, getting into the second quarter. Like, what are you thinking about stock? How is your head mentally? What are the anxieties you're feeling? And I know that today is a tough day. I mean, tariffs and stuff. I mean, this whole month has been
Past week has been a whirlwind.
Yeah. So where is your head at? Are you feeling anxiety? Are you feeling how are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, the way I'm thinking of, the tariff landscape right now, tons of tariffs announced the past week. A lot of investors kind of shook, a huge market sell-off, $6 to $7 trillion of market cap just, shed in the past, 2 weeks. Incredible, loss, essentially. But if you think about big picture of, what's occurring in the economy, we have a huge trade deficit, with almost every country we trade with, which is why the tariffs were enacted in the first place. I personally don't think that it's going to bring jobs back to America. I know a lot of people think it will. I think that countries, specifically in Asia, that drop their tariffs to 0 for 0. For example, if Vietnam dropped their tariffs to 0%, United States drops their tariffs against Vietnam for 0%. I think a lot of
Oh, so is that how it's working? He's doing a 0 0?
I think. Don't quote me on that, but
yeah.
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That's what's going on from what I've been hearing. I think a lot of countries
Okay.
or a lot of companies rather, stationed in China, they're manufacturing, for example, like Apple. They might move their manufacturing to a zero tariff country like Vietnam, so that they still have cheap access to labor, able to keep the cost down, and also lower tariff rates with the United States.
Right.
I think it's really just a move to kind of decentralize our supply chain away from China specifically.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about COVID, right? Took forever to get any computer part made in China, graphics processing units or CPUs even. So
possible to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we need to really kind of decentralize the supply chain. I think that's the main purpose of the tariffs. In addition to kind of plugging the hole of our trade deficit. So super valid for investors to sell off the market right now. Really unsure of how that's going to play out on a company basis. A lot of companies are taking different strategies, right? Some might just, stay in China, hike prices. Others might, do near-shoring to, Canada or Mexico, or even on-shoring to, plants in the United States. We're seeing a lot of car manufacturers kind of come back as well. So really interesting to see how this is going to play out long term.
Yeah. And so I guess a lot of Wall Streeters, a lot of people are saying, well, this is the time of uncertainty. The market's super uncertain. And what I say to that is, we're always in a market of uncertainty. Yeah. When are we not in a market of uncertainty? Yeah. Why are you calling it the market of uncertainty now? Just because it's down, right? It's uncertain even when it's going up. We don't know how high it's going to go up.
Yeah.
And so how do you deal with this uncertainty when you personally invest? When you invest in some of your stocks and some of them go down, some of them go up, and you don't know when to sell, you don't know when to buy. Nobody does, right? How do you deal with uncertainty?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a really good question. Something that I'm going to start taking more notice to in the future is looking for businesses with strong fundamentals, like cash flow, for example. I used to work in telecom private equity for a period of time, and the subscribers of internet fiber to the home. If you have a fiber internet cord ran to your house, you're going to be paying probably $80 to $100 a month. So companies like that with consistent recurring revenue, high switching costs, and low competitors, right? So if there's already fiber to your home, you're not going to see Comcast build fiber to the home when there's other people without fiber that they can just build it to. It makes no sense when you're charging the same amount.
Yeah.
So companies with strong fundamental cash flows, strong capitalization, whether it's highly leveraged or under leveraged, understanding how the cap structure plays out for dividends and into the stock price. I guess you're looking for a beta closer to 1 than versus a beta of higher than 1, for example, or lower than 1. Just something with consistent cash flows. It's kind of bulletproof businesses essentially.
Yeah. So it seems like the companies with power, right?
Yeah.
The companies, I guess, power is from controlling the wants and needs of I guess, people, right? So that's exactly what it is, and being consistently doing that over time. So that's really cool. So last question I have for you is, you're still very young. It seems like you've got a lot of experience under your belt. For somebody who wants to break into investment banking, whether it's, creating their own company or private equity, corporate finance, just all of that whole world, right? What's the piece of advice that you might give to them?
Do the little things on a daily basis to really build your skill set, whether that's, study technicals, improve your behaviorals, do mock interviews, which are severely underrated, highly recommend, and just make sure you're doing the little things on a day-to-day basis and just don't quit. There's a point where you have to understand, okay, this industry might not be for me. If it's one thing that you don't really understand, what's going on in the market, you don't really find a passion for it, that's fine. Move on. It's not for you. Whether it's, banking, private equity, or, working at a restaurant, right? Just making sure that you're aligning yourself in something you're passionate with. and you're building the skill sets on a day-to-day basis to really achieve that goal. And also, if you're able to do those things, don't quit. A lot of people told me, oh, you'll never be able to transfer to, top 10 school for finance. I'm here. A lot of people told me that I would never be able to break into, banking, private equity so late. I did it, right? Just tuning out the noise and really focusing on your skill set and believing in yourself to really achieve what you want to achieve in life is what's really important, right? Well, for me, a lot of people told me, I'd never be able to start a pressure washing business successfully. Okay, cool. Watch me do it, right? And if I fail, great. It's a learning opportunity. I'm going to take that learning experience and take a different approach to whatever I do in life next. But, I've been very fortunate to kind of, be nimble on my feet, take advice from people who have already been in the space, really apply that to my, own learning curve. And that's really helped me progress a lot faster than others, specifically like, starting a business or whatnot.
That's really well said. The don't quit. A few times now I've referenced this meme. The diamond, the pickaxe and the diamond.
Yeah.
Okay. I've confirmed that this is a well-known thing and that I'm not crazy, but that it's actually funny. I gotta call it something, but it's exactly that. Don't quit. Like you gotta keep going, right? The diamonds are just on the other end of that wall, and so that's great. I really appreciate you coming on to this podcast, sharing a lot of advice and experiences, and with that, thank you for tuning into the Nagomi podcast.